to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
It's sad, it's disgusting, and I cannot pretend like I feel like this is justice. Those are the words of Kaylee Goncalves' father, Steve Goncalves, getting word of this plea deal that is about to go down in Boise, Idaho tomorrow. Welcome to STS Nation. This is the show that brings you, welcome STS Nation to Survive the Survivor, the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime. And today you guys are in for a special treat with our guest here tonight. You've got Aaron Tognetti, a former prosecutor, and does defense work. You've got Colin McCallan hosting Is This Legal podcast, and also is a criminal defense attorney out of Denver. And last but certainly not least, Jim Jones. You saved the best for last, I think, a former attorney general in the state of Idaho, working on the appellate side of death penalty cases. He did that in the early 80s through 90s. So welcome to everybody. Now, we all know that Bryan Kohberger, the accused killer of the 4 innocent University of Idaho students, has now agreed to plead guilty to all charges. I misunderstood this myself. I thought that there was going to be some sort of hearing to decide on the actual hearing, but tomorrow, this is the hearing on this plea deal, and we are going to hear, presumably, and stranger things have happened, but we are supposed to hear Bryan Kohberger admit to guilt on 4 different occasions tomorrow. Jim Jones, you've been around for more years than the rest of us on the panel, and that's not to rub it in. That's because you're a wise legal mind. Tell us what to expect tomorrow.
Well, it kind of depends on what the judge decides he's going to do, but the parties will present the plea deal. And if this is the hearing where the judge is expected to accept it, he's going to grill Kohberger to make sure it was voluntary, that he understood all of his rights, blah, 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 because, the judge is going to be wanting to close off any avenue he might have of saying, well, geez, I didn't know about this. My lawyers misinformed me. They were ineffective, blah, blah, blah. So, and I assume if this is the final thing, that the victim impact statements will come in. I don't know how they can do that. I think they have to have some preparation. So I can't tell you what the procedure is, but I don't see how they could get everything handled at this hearing.
Yeah, from what I understand, Jim, that is going to be done. The victim impact statements are going to be done during sentencing toward the end of July, so in less than 4 weeks' time. But let me go to Aaron. This is a question a lot of people are asking. First of all, Aaron, can you explain what an allocution is, and will Bryan Kohberger have to allocute?
They typically don't. An allocution is really if you're explaining what happened. I mean, in my experience anyway, I've seen it more when it was a misdemeanor or something, and they would have to say, okay, well, tell me what happened when someone's pleading guilty. They don't always do that in felonies, and especially on something this high level, a lot of times they won't make them necessarily go into a full allocution. But so what I've seen is, well, tell me what happened. Well, I borrowed my buddy's jacket, and yes, I had it, and then I got pulled over, and I didn't realize there were drugs in the pocket. Right? That's an allocution. The way that they typically happen, especially in cases where someone's going to go to prison for the rest of their life or for decades at least, that I've seen is, okay, you've been charged with the murder, and it'll literally read kind of the charge from the complaint. And how do you plead to that charge? Guilty. Allocution is something that it could be in the plea agreement. That part we don't know, because we haven't seen the plea agreement. But that is something that you can require. We just don't know if they went that far, and it would seem like they would have, like the prosecutor who's kind of been taking a lot of heat would have said, this is what we've wanted, is to get him to admit what he did and get him to explain. And I think they would have already played that card if they had it. And we haven't heard that. So I'm expecting this change of plea to be fairly generic.
Very interesting. This is all happening at a breakneck pace. Colin was on the show the other day discussing Barry Morphew. Colin, I know you know most of this, but let me just go through some of the particulars. Bryan Kohberger is now 30 years old. He is set tomorrow to plead guilty to 4 counts of murder, first-degree murder, and 1 count of felony burglary. In exchange, prosecutors are set to drop the death penalty, sparing him from possible execution by firing squad. So it would be likely 4 consecutive life sentences, no possibility of parole, 10-year maximum for burglary, 0 chance of appeal, waiver is part of the deal, restitution will be pursued for victims' families. This is all going down, and we're going to bring it to you live tomorrow on STS, I believe at 11 a.m. At the Ada County Courthouse in Boise, with sentencing expected in late July. Now, Colin, I was under the impression, because I know judges like to have hearings about future hearings about then the next hearing. So I thought we were going to have a hearing about what's going to be done at the plea hearing, but this is it. Are you, number one, are you surprised that a plea deal was cut? And is this moving ridiculously fast right now, almost at a pace where I don't even know if the families can all get out there in time?
Yes, on both counts, Joel. I am surprised that a plea deal was even reached in the first place. Kind of talking about it from both ends. I mean, I think, this was very much a community oriented crime, right? We're talking about a relatively smaller jurisdiction, and in a community that was completely rocked by this. And I would have expected this case to go to trial. I would have expected the prosecutor to say, you know what, we're going to let our community decide this case. We're going to take this to a jury. We're going to let them make a decision. It's their decision to make. So I am surprised on that. I'm also somewhat surprised that Bryan Kohberger also was interested in this deal from this standpoint. Clearly, this plea deal is going to save his life. And I think that's certainly the goal for any criminal defense attorney who is handling a capital case like this. Number one, prevent the state from executing your client. And that's been achieved here. However, we're talking about a 30-year-old person who's got his whole life in front of him. He's going to be sitting in prison. He's waiving his appeals. He's not going to ever get to fight this. And the only reason I say I'm surprised from his end is, he could have said, well, okay, let's roll the dice and go to trial. Yeah, I could be convicted, but I'm going to be tying up the appellate courts for the next 20 years, with my appeals, and maybe they'll find something that I can hang my hat on. And who knows whether or not, he'll ever face execution anyway. Support for the death penalty has been trending downward nationally. You never know what's going to happen. I come from Colorado, where just in recent years, we've more or less abolished the death penalty. And so the fact that he was willing to basically sign up for a life sentence also kind of surprised me. But yes, getting back to your other question, the speed in which this is happening, we've been talking about Kohberger on my podcast for 2.5 years now. I know you've been talking about him for a long time. And within a week, we've gone to entry of a plea. We're getting in front of court to do the plea, and we're going to have sentencing in a month. So I certainly understand from the victim's perspective how this feels rushed, how they may feel underprepared for this. And that's in contrast to just how long everything's taken so far. So yes, I'm surprised by kind of everything that's been happening in the last few hours.
Yeah. By the way, I know almost no one cares about my personal life, but I will tell you this for a reason. I was at the World Cup. If you don't know, there are 2 World Cups, and there's one going on right now. And I was at a Real Madrid game. My son is obsessed, 6 years old, with soccer. And we had amazing seats that I was given. So I took my son, and then all hell broke loose with Diddy and Kohberger. We shifted up. So My apologies go out to Jim Jones, because I have to be honest, I didn't know exactly who I was getting, but Steve Cohen is a magician, and I should be calling him the Honorable Jim Jones, because not only was he the Idaho Attorney General from 83 to 91, he was a justice of the Idaho Supreme Court. You're looking at a Supreme Court justice here from 2005 to 2017. And you know how you know someone's important? Their bio is 2 lines long. His bio is 2 lines long. Everyone else has to have 75 lines for their bio. So my apologies that I was not calling you the Honorable Jim Jones, but now I will. And the Honorable Jim Jones, are you, I mean, I guess just from a bird's eye, 30,000 foot altitude view here, this is a case that the government, the state of Idaho, invested 2.5+ years into, and now they're saying, okay, let's do this deal. The defense apparently went to them. Are you surprised by how this all played out?
I was a little bit surprised when I heard the news that they had arranged a plea deal, but quite frankly, I've seen these cases from the standpoint of the AG's office and also from the standpoint of the court. When I walked into office, there was a guy named Thomas Creech, who was a serial killer. He got off when the Supreme Court of the U.S. decided to vacate all the death sentences, but then he killed somebody in prison, and he was facing a death sentence. And that was 42 years ago. He went through multiple claims that ineffective assistance of counsel, post-conviction relief. He is going to die probably of old age, and it has been extremely costly to the state of Idaho to handle the cases that go up and down in the state and federal courts. And I think it is really wearing on the survivors of the victims to have to go through that uncertainty time and time and time again. So I think the state was looking at it. They're either going to get a death sentence, which is going to take forever to get resolved, or we're going to have him out there in the prison, which is going to last for the rest of his life. It's going to be cheaper to do that. We've got a case where we can get a conviction, but all of the fussing and fighting will come in at the end once he's in the prison, and trying to litigate, and people will say, well, you gave up all those rights, and he's going to have to pull a rabbit out of the hat to cause a lot of additional litigation.
I know that Colin and Aaron will indulge me, because we've got a former Supreme Court in the state of Idaho. We've got a former Supreme Court justice. So I want to make sure that we give him his proper respect. And before I do that, let me, like on a basketball, talk smack for a minute. If there's any panel out there tonight discussing Bryan Kohberger with a former state Supreme Court justice on it with this kind of experience, or the 2 other guests, you email me, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com, and I will give you your money back. How about that? Even though you guys aren't paying money, you're not going to get better guests anywhere than Surviving the Survivor. If you're new, we do this night in, night out. Shout out to Steve Cohen, who books our guests, the best guests in all of true crime. Okay, now I'm done with that. But Linda Burton here. My ex was killed, and this is a very real life example. And Linda, I never knew this, and Linda's been here a long time. My ex was killed in a home invasion with his own gun. The thug went to trial claiming self-defense. Quick decision, life without parole. Thug still claims innocence. We suffered through the trial, but got no closure. Jim, we're going to get to the family in a moment. There's division among the victims' families here, but if you could, you're obviously a man with a lot of wisdom. If you could consult the families, and I guess in particular, I want to say the Kernodle and the Goncalves family. They've been particularly vocal, I believe. Definitely the Goncalves is. about wanting to go to trial and putting him to death. How would you comfort them or console them?
Well, you have to be realistic. I don't know exactly how much time the prosecution spent with the families. I think it's critical that you do that because they need to have confidence in the criminal justice system. When I was AG, I got a victims' rights bill through the legislature that gave everybody the opportunity to have their say. Of course, the prosecutor has the final say so on whether to accept a plea deal. It seems like there should maybe have been more groundwork done with the families to let them know that this thing could go on forever and ever. And I think probably the one thing that is most important to them is to have an admission that he committed the crime. And, the defense, I think, was maybe a little bit overzealous because they tried to pull many rabbits out of the hat and it just didn't work. And I think maybe they taxed the prosecution a bit, but if the prosecution did not sit down with the families and give them a reasonable opportunity to learn what was going on and what the various aspects of the settlement were, and I assume they did that, but I don't know. But it's something that certainly should have been done.
Yeah, and by the way, Jim was talking about Thomas Creech. They tried to put him to death. He was too dehydrated by injection, so he was never put to death. But I think they are going to pursue capital punishment again. Am I right about that, Jim?
Yes. Tom was one of my interesting people. He did actually send me a letter once asking that he be put to death because his girlfriend jilted him. And we tried to get that done, but he changed his mind.
I'm sure you've got some interesting letters over the years. So I'm going to work backwards now to Colin. Colin, I have to be honest. I don't know the particulars of this, but someone mentioned it to me and I watched it. Ted Bundy, who apparently Bryan Kohberger sort of fashioned himself after. He's got those hoodie selfies and apparently was searching him and looking up to him. There was a moment on where Ted Bundy was apparently going to plead guilty to some charges, and then he gets on camera and pled not guilty. So the bigger question, and STS Nation can give me the context for that, but it's all caught on camera. Is there a shot that we get in there tomorrow? I know it's a very, very long shot, but this guy who looks up to Ted Bundy, and Ted Bundy apparently did this, can he get up there and say something like, I was forced into this, I'm pleading not guilty, and I want to get rid of my lawyers? What in the hell would happen if that happened?
Well, that would be fascinating, right? And it would make for, it would just turn this story, on its head all over again, as if we needed that. There's been so much excitement with this case anyway, but kind of like what Justice Jones was actually talking about. These hearings are, there's procedure to them. One of the things that the judge is required to do, his main role, in fact, is making sure that Bryan Kohberger is entering this plea knowingly and voluntarily, that everything has been explained to him, that there's no secrets, that he is fully aware of his actions and what he is doing. I expect there to be a fair amount of questioning from the judge directly to Mr. Kohberger, where he's going to basically have to assert that, yes, I understand what I'm doing. I understand the consequences of my actions. And I understand those can't be undone. Could he get up there and, kind of go rogue and say, I don't know what my attorney's talking about. I'm not pleading guilty. Of course he could do that. And if he did that, I would expect the judge to say, okay, well, thanks for wasting our time, everybody, but we've got a trial date and we're just going to start working back toward trial. I mean, if he decides to continue his plea of not guilty, then we're just going to go to trial. I doubt the prosecution would give him any deals after that. But this sure sounds like it's going to get done, and sounds like it's going to get done tomorrow.
Yeah. Tomorrow's gonna be fascinating. We're bringing that to you live, and I may or may not show up in Boise for the sentencing, but I think I will. So we will have that toward the end of July, and this was something that people were very interested in watching play out in real time. I have to say publicly that there's all kinds of stuff that goes back and forth, but publicly, I just want to say that I just want the families of these victims. And by the way, I start every show, but because of the sort of frenetic pace of today, I didn't do it this time, but I'm going to put this up here. These are the victims. These are the most important people. Ethan Chapin, who's a triplet. Now his brother and sister need to go on in life as just two. You've got Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, and Xana Kernodle, and of course Ethan and Xana were a couple, and Stacy Chapin announced that she will be there tomorrow, and she's not speaking to any media. But I have to say, I could not care less. Were people going to, all the media outlets, the YouTubers, were going to profit off of this and make money? Yeah, I mean that's what media outlets do. Any day of the week would take $0. I just want comfort for these families. I understand that they're divided, but after going through this, I just want them to feel comfort, and that's precisely why I just asked Justice Jones how he would do that with the Goncalves family, because they're in agony right now. So I just wanted to say that publicly, that my heart bleeds for them, and this is sort of a lose-lose, no matter which way you slice it, because they're never getting their kids back. So with that said, Aaron, to you, and I just have to remind you to unmute yourself. Can you sort of walk us through, and I know this is probably the biggest case to ever hit Idaho, but what can we expect tomorrow? I'm understanding that it's going to be about an hour-long hearing. What happens? What is the judge? How does the judge gavel in court? What is his responsibility? What's the government have to do? What does the defense have to do? And what does Bryan Kohberger have to say or do?
Right. And like I say, so some of this will depend on, some of it depends a little bit on the judge. Some of it will depend a little bit on whatever the plea agreement is. Typically a change of plea is, for somebody who's been proclaiming their innocence, I think that there will be a lot of peace in tomorrow for the for the family, who finally get to actually hear him say the words guilty. Because that's so in Idaho, and you might be familiar with the phrase because you see it all over TV because it's big in California, but there's no contest. I plead no contest. Pleading no contest essentially means, and it's big in California, and they kind of let everybody do it. And pleading no contest essentially means I'm not saying I'm guilty. I'm saying I can't fight the charges. And so I'm licensed in California. I'm licensed in Idaho. And then in Idaho, we don't have that, but we do have something that's called an Alford plea. And the Alford plea is the kind of Idaho's version of it, but we just don't agree to it very often unless it really has no bearing on the victims, on the kind of crime that it is. In a case like this, I'm sure that they would never agree to an Alford plea. And an Alford plea essentially, like I say, it's like that no contest. I'm not saying I did it. I'm just saying I can't fight these charges. I can't fight the evidence. So what they're going to be able to hear tomorrow is that the judge, as Colin already alluded to, and frankly, Tara Malik yesterday, she kind of almost gave you the script because it's very much a script. And he goes through all of your rights. You're giving up the right to cross-examine witnesses. You're giving up the right to a trial, by your peers of 12 people. You're giving up, and he goes through all of his constitutional rights he's giving up to enter the plea. Then are you doing this, knowingly? Have you had any alcohol or drugs? Anything that would impair your ability to understand what you're doing today? I mean, it's they kind of follow a very sort of strict script that the judge has to go through, and he has to get all of these affirmative responses from the bad guy I'm going to follow Phil's lead from yesterday and stop using his name. But so, has to get all of these yes answers that you understand. Then he's going to go through the charges. And then the question is when he says, you've been charged with, and then it's going to be it's fairly textbook, but it's going to be the language, right, of our murder statute here in Idaho. And then there's going to be one for each of the victims. And how do you plead to that charge? Guilty. He's going to have to say guilty, the word guilty. Then the question is the judge going to say, tell me what happened? Because it happens sometimes in plea deals. It doesn't happen after a jury trial, right? So if this had gone all the way to a jury trial, he would never have to say that's why our listener who was talking about, that the guy's still proclaiming his innocence. That doesn't happen with a plea deal. So if the judge says, tell me what happened, he's going to have to, it can be bare bones, but he's going to have to say, I went into the house and I stabbed her or something. So that's the part that we just don't know until it happens. Something this high profile, it's hard to say exactly how the judge is going to handle it, but I'd be very curious to see what Justice Jones thinks, that will play out as tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to. Justice Jones, number one, in your opinion, during your tenure in the state of Idaho as also a Supreme Court Justice and Attorney General, is this now the biggest case that Idaho has ever seen? Oh, you're muted. Go ahead. Go ahead, Justice.
Probably the most brutal. We've had some cases that go back way in our history. The Hayward and Orchard trial, which dealt with the assassination of a governor, but this is certainly way up there amongst those cases.
Yeah, and what is your understanding? Because Aaron is saying that he's going to have to, admit guilt, and we're going to get into the specifics of what he doesn't and doesn't have to do. My understanding is he only has to say guilty or I am guilty 4 different times, but he doesn't have to say for what, of what, why, who, where, no motive, nothing. What should we expect tomorrow from him, from Bryan Kohberger? What should we expect to hear from him?
Well, the judge is going to mention each one of the charges, and he is going to want to get unequivocal answers from Kohberger that he did it, that he was doing it, consciously, that he has been advised. If Kohberger tries to give equivocal answers, the judge is not going to have it. And he says, okay, if that's the way it's going to be, he may not accept it. But he's going to nail him down very closely on the elements of the crime, on every aspect of, how he was advised and so on. So there's not going to be any daylight between Kohberger and the fact that he committed these vicious crimes.
Colin, to you, I'm just going to go through a list of what the plea does and quote unquote doesn't do. It avoids trial, obviously. That was scheduled to begin August 18th, if you'll recall. It was just pushed back a few days because the public defender, before this deal was made, said there was too much discovery. They needed some more time. It eliminates, as you heard from the justice, decades of appeals that would follow a death penalty conviction, literally decades. It guarantees conviction and permanent imprisonment, avoiding potential risks of acquittal or mistrial. But, and this is the part I think everyone's having a really hard time with, no public explanation of motive will be required. He's going to confirm or have to confirm that he committed the acts, but does not need to say why, which is going to leave these victims' families with a lot of unanswered questions. Should there be a change here? And I'm going to ask the justice this as well, but I mean, should he be compelled to have to give more information than just the fact that, I'm guilty of these crimes?
I mean, should he be? That's certainly maybe the better question. Will he be required to do that? No. I agree with what Aaron was talking about earlier. I think he's just going to have to say those words, guilty, not guilty. He's not going to have to go into an explanation about this whole thing. I will tell you, this discussion, in thinking about this over the last 24 hours, it's reminded me of a case that we had in Colorado. And this was the Aurora Theater shooting that happened in 2012 with James Holmes. Okay, let me just briefly talk about that case, because there are some parallels here. It was a horrible, horrible crime. It was very notorious, of course, here nationally, as well as, of course, right here in Colorado. And there was a death penalty decision to be made in that case. And just to let your listeners know, what happened is James Holmes, his defense team went many times to the prosecution and said he will plead guilty to everything, just spare his life. He will waive his appeal. Essentially the same thing that Mr. Kohberger's defense team proposed. And here in Colorado, the district attorney here said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to try the case, the death penalty, where we're asking for the death penalty. So that case proceeded. So, you had months of trial. He was, of course, convicted of everything, but then there was the penalty phase about what's going to happen to him. That part just lasted 6 weeks, and he ended up, his life was spared. The jury did not impose the death penalty, and that prosecution cost the state of Colorado $5 million. It was a 6-month trial, and keep in mind, because he was convicted, he still has all of his appellate rights. He still, I still don't know to this day, 13 years later, if he's exhausted all of his appellate rights. And, this is something that the victims still have to deal with. I know that in a way I'm comparing apples and oranges with these cases, but, there are costs that go beyond just dollars and cents here. I mean, think about this. Everybody who worked on that prosecution, all of the team members, the paralegals, the district attorneys, the support staff had to prepare that horrible graphic evidence for trial. All of the first responders, all of the victims who weren't slain had to come in and relive that trauma. And again, we can debate whether or not that was appropriate, but I think there is something to say where, if this person's going away for the rest of his life, and if we're talking about particularly grisly murders, with graphic evidence that probably, there are pictures that no one should ever have to see. I think that is a very, very strong consideration for how we ended up in this plea in this particular case. And I can understand it from both sides, where they want to say, look, we do not want this case to go to trial. I was just thinking about that case, and I wanted to offer it to the panel. I'm sure my panel colleagues have other cases that they can recall that deal with this exact dilemma, but it's been something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought it up. I actually covered that case for Fox News. I was out there for a bunch of days, another tragic case, and thankfully, it's been a few weeks since there's at least a big mass shooting, although there are way too many out here. But Justice Jones, to you, does the law need to change? Should Bryan Kohberger be compelled just for peace of mind? I mean, the victims' families, in my opinion, should be at the forefront, and they're going to have questions. So, you're the person at one point that was literally, creating and helping orchestrate, I guess, the law in the great state of Idaho. But does the law need to change so that people like this need to be compelled during a plea hearing to give more information than just saying, yes, I'm guilty of this?
I don't think so. The thing is that you wouldn't want to put a lot of store in the truth of what these people spew out at a hearing. If you required them to say, well, here's what I did, either you would get some horrible facts that would, I think, make the families, feel really terrible. Following up on what my colleague said, I had a friend who prosecuted Ted Bundy in one of his first trials. He told me that there were some facts in that case that would curl your hair, and he has never said what they were, but it was just ghastly, according to him, and it still affects him. And if stuff like that came out in a hearing where you're saying, why did you do it? And what did you do? And all this stuff, I think it could have a lasting impact on the families and not advance the interests of justice one bit.
I think that's an amazing point. I was reading some articles early this morning about some criminal profilers who said that this is, and look, I am not the victims' families, and we don't, we're not walking in their shoes, but this profiler, or a couple profilers, believe that some of the details that would come out about the way these murders were carried out and the specifics of what he did with that knife are so haunting that these profilers believe that this is, again, they're not the victims' families, but they are professionals who deal with these kind of depraved minds, and they think that they are essentially saving the family from hearing or seeing with those crime scene photos what they can never unsee. So I think the justice brings up a great point. There was Justice Jones, just back to you. There's been a big sort of I don't want to call it a public furor over the way this was handled. I don't know if you know Bill Thompson, the Latah County DA, but should he have, I don't know, clarified things more with the family, spoken to them at greater length? It seems like this was rushed, and it's up to the government to make this decision ultimately, but should he have taken some more time, like a proverbial breath, or a beat before he went and announced this, and this decision all came to fruition?
Well, it's hard to really say. Thompson does have a good reputation in the state. He's been in the position for quite some time. Certainly doesn't get this kind of a high-profile case. Never has, actually. I can't tell you what he did. I don't feel that I should comment on whether he failed his responsibility to the families, but I can say they should have been consulted with at length and given the facts, like what might come out that the prosecution and the police haven't said already. I'm guessing that the prosecutor knew that they would get a guilty verdict. But another problem is we have to have a sentencing by unanimous jury to get the death penalty. And he may have had some quirks in his personality, apparently does, that you might have found one person who wasn't willing to do it. So, they've got it nailed down. I don't know if they handled it appropriately with the families, but I think this is probably as good an outcome in such a horrible situation as they could have arrived at.
Yeah, and Justice Jones, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I love talking to guys like you who have all this wisdom. Is there a single most important thing that you learned in your time in the world of criminal justice as a justice for the Supreme Court of Idaho? Is there a singular thing that you would say to, I don't know, your grandchildren, hey, this is what is most important?
Well, it's hard to fathom how people could engage in this type of depraved activity. I mean, to use a knife, it's not like you're shooting somebody, you're carving them up, and it's just disgusting. And you have to tell people that, these kind of people need to be put away. It doesn't matter whether they're executed or imprisoned for life. They just don't need to be in our lives. And you can't put any faith in anything that they say in their defense. I haven't found too many criminal defendants that I've had much faith in as far as telling the truth.
Mm.
So, the better thing is just to shut them up and put them away.
Well said. And to the point. It's another thing about very smart people. They keep things simple, not complicated. The COE, the chief of everything. Everyone has one in their life, male, female, whatever, but she is my wife. COE, we've got some sound of the Goncalves family. I don't think I can play it. I think you have to play it. So this is the Goncalves family speaking out today. We also have the Chapin family, but let's start with the Goncalves. Is everyone stand by for this?
Prepared for this. We had no idea that this was going to happen. It's the opposite of what we wanted. I won't speak on all the family's parts, but I can 100%, because I was in the same room with them fighting against this decision with multiple families. This is not the majority.
You hear that. Aaron, you like to respond to that, and I'll give a little bit more context.
I not to beat a dead horse, but as a prosecutor, that was one of the things that was always really important to me. But I did spend a lot of time with victims, and I talked about, there is no sure thing. There's no smoking gun case. As good a case as you think it is, there's always a chance of an acquittal. No matter how small, there's always a chance. In a case like this, where then you move on to the penalty phase, there's always a chance someone's going to have, someone, maybe a son or something who's on the spectrum and have a certain soft spot. As much as you try to do what you can when you're doing your voir dire and picking that jury, you're trying to find people without those soft spots. But sometimes people don't tell you everything when you're picking that jury. So but that's the conversation that should have happened, and they're hard conversations. I've had them with young girls, and that just completely ended in tears, and it breaks your heart as a prosecutor. But at the same time, you need to make them understand the ways that this can go wrong, and what a good how you're getting 99% of everything we want. You're getting your guilty, you're getting closure, and you're getting a bad guy put away where he'll never hurt anybody ever again. So you're getting 99%. You're just not getting the retribution that you wanted, which is something different than justice. And like I say, I've had those very, very tough conversations that will stick with me for the rest of my life, because they're hard to have. But as the prosecutor, you need to make them understand all of the, basically we have a lot of factors in this, and the justices talked about a lot of those same things. And when you're looking at all of those factors, there are ways this could go wrong. It's a good case. I'm not saying it's not. I feel like there is a ton of evidence, but things can always go wrong, or they could go through this entire brutal, gory trial, get their guilty, and then have him get life without parole, which is exactly where we are right now. But it's right now, and without dragging this family through 3 months of a fairly traumatizing trial. That's my feeling.
I think that's really, really well said, and I could feel the emotion there. I'm just wondering, to Justice Jones's point, are you haunted by some of the things that you had to look at and see as a prosecutor? You're the prosecutor; you have to do this all the time. You're not one of the families, but we have detectives on here. Phil Waters is a homicide detective. He talks about seeing, babies, young children, things that he will never unsee. I'm just wondering if that's taken a toll on you at all.
Yeah, and my cases, I mean, I've seen the dead bodies. I guess I've been in the room with them. Yeah. But in my cases, as I've mentioned, it was more child abuse. It was, which is horrific on a different level. And because I was spending so much time with the traumatized, I carry it with me in a different way. So, you see the brutality, and I've seen that, but I actually think what I carry with me more from my years on those kind of cases are dealing with these children, or teenagers, or even young adults who have gone through this whole process with me and talked about these things, and gotten graduation announcements and how they flew alone for the first time, things like that. And it makes you feel really good, but it's also hard not to take a little bit of that, that trauma inside. And I'm sure the judge is his time in as an AG. I mean, they have a lot of prosecutors. We have to go take this vicarious trauma courses to understand kind of what you're taking in. And my law enforcement, friends, I mean, they're sort of on the front line. We kind of take it, they hand it off to us, and then they move on to the next one. And so, it's a little bit different. I feel like the stuff that, what Phil deals with, Phil Waters, that we were talking about, is even more. And I know my law enforcement friends, I just try to be as supportive as I can, because in a lot of ways, I was law enforcement, but I don't understand, being able to do that for 20 years, because it's a lot.
Yeah. First responders see some horrific things. But Justice Jones, just want to get your take as well. So the defense, is making the case prior to this plea that this is a guy who's on the autism spectrum. Do you think it's sort of a moot point in the sense that it was maybe leaning towards the fact that jurors either would not have been able to or would not have wanted to maybe put Bryan Kohberger to death because of this alleged diagnosis? A lot of people don't buy it. They don't believe it. But assuming they could prove that he has autism, do you think that would have kept the death penalty off the table in some manner?
Certainly a risk that you have, because, you've got to get a unanimous jury. And some people, I mean, the guy has obviously got some problems. And if some juror was to say, well, I've known somebody in my family like that, and I don't think they'd ever do anything like this, but you never can tell. I think it's a bit of a risk. And, at least here you've got certainty, and you've got a result that's not going to be banging around the courts for the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. Shout out to my friend Abby Tahaha and Wesley John Holmes, an Aussie living in Tokyo, Black Widow, and a lot of the Best Nancy, Meg P. All these people are in this chat day in, day out. We really appreciate it. Kathleen P. So thank you. I just happened to stop right there. So if I'm missing anyone, K9 Catherine, one of the best, I appreciate all of you. A little worried about Best Nancy. I'm a little worried about Ned Smith, if anyone knows what's up with her. But he's also a PhD candidate. He knew exactly what he was doing. There's some truth to that. Just to give a little more context to the sound we just saw with Steve Goncalves, he literally said they have failed us, meaning the state of Idaho. Went on to say you can't just let someone walk in and kill our kids and then negotiate with them. He said prosecutors gave almost no notice and sought no genuine input. Here's the quote. It was a hard no from our family. He's talking about the plea deal. We fought harder than anyone could ever imagine. This has been going on for over 2.5 years. And then he feels, I'm sure, like the rug was pulled out from under him. But we have sound as well from the Chapin family. COE, can you roll that? We'll get, I think, a different perspective. And then a few more things, and we'll get some final thoughts in a little while.
Decided maybe it was best to tell our story of Ethan literally one time. He deserves it. He deserves our story of him.
This morning, as the Idaho murder suspect prepares to accept a plea deal, the family of Ethan Chapin speaking publicly together for the first time since Ethan, his girlfriend Xana Kernodle, and her roommates Madison Mogan and Kaylee Goncalves were brutally murdered in an off-campus home at the University of Idaho.
I miss him every day. When you lose your son at 20, it's different. It's a different loss. And I do. I miss him every single day. And I always will.
That's if I think about it, I'm going to lose it. I came here from, like I said, a World Cup soccer game with a 6-year-old. I got started late with this parenting thing, but with a 6-year-old son, and the joy that kid had, and to see this father have that ripped from him is gut wrenching. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just numb from all this, that I don't feel more, but it is heartbreaking to hear that. But Colin, to you, I mean, look, the Chapin family, they are supporting the deal. We just saw the father, we just saw the mother. They said very explicitly they're not talking tomorrow. The Mogan family is also in favor of this deal. Ben Mogan, the father, says, if it means avoiding reopening wounds we've worked to heal, then I accept. And he says that they're going to issue a formal statement after the hearing via their attorney, a guy named Leander James, tomorrow. But this is a tough situation because you got half the families or 4 victims, half want this and half don't want this. How do you split that difference on something that's so tragic? You got to unmute.
It is tragic, and those conversations are horrible. I echo what Erin was talking about in her prosecutorial days. I was a prosecutor for 6 years prior to switching to defense, and you do have to have conversations sometimes with folks, and sometimes as a prosecutor, you have to explain why you're doing something that they disagree with. And clearly, if you're a prosecutor, you don't want what's been going on in the last 24 hours where, you're due to some miscommunication or the way you've handled this, you've got at least one family just kind of going to anybody who will listen and say, we're really not happy with this. We're not happy with this. I'm not saying the prosecution made the wrong decision by any means. In fact, I do think this, if you have to find an outcome for a situation this horrible, this isn't the worst outcome that exists. But I'm certainly not going to profess to say how someone should feel after such a horrible loss. But that is what prosecutors have to do, right? I mean, there's a reason that victim rights acts only go so far. And I think Erin might agree with this. I mean, ultimately, we want victims to be heard. We want them to feel like they are part of the process. But at the same time, the prosecutor is the one who has to make the decision. They're the ones who can objectively look at the evidence. They're the ones who can objectively look at the investigation and decide what is best for the people of that community, not just limited to the victim, although clearly that's a significant part of it. And it's hard to hear Mr. Goncalves claim that he doesn't feel like justice has been served here. That's not what you want to hear. At the same time, though, that doesn't mean the prosecution got it wrong. They probably should have handled it differently, maybe with a little bit more TLC, maybe with a little bit more compassion. Certainly, I think they should have maybe hit the brakes a little bit and kind of slowed things down and maybe try and make sure that they could communicate with everybody. But yeah, this is a super, super tough decision. And ultimately, while the victims do have protections under the law, I think it does make sense for the objective prosecutors who have legal training and legal experience and investigation experience to make the final decision on the case.
Yeah. This is an interesting comment here. I'm going to throw this one to Justice Jones from Supra. I'll leave it at that. Do you agree with this, Justice Jones? Unfortunately, justice does not exist for a crime this horrific. Is that true?
Well, I think that is true. I mean, what do? You can't bring the people back. You can't undo this horrible crime. It's unfortunate, but you only have 2 wretched outcomes. either to send him to the firing squad. That doesn't give much closure to the families, or to put him in prison for the rest of his life. I mean, it's just two bad outcomes for the families. The thing is, you have to handle it in a fashion that gives them the most comfort you can and makes them feel like they had some say-so in it. And, I think that's important to show the public that the criminal justice system is trying to be as good from a standpoint of letting people take part, the victims' families take part, and to accomplish the means of disposing of these people. So, I mean, it's a tough thing, and it may well be that more. I think where it came out so quickly, it caught a lot of people by surprise, and you know, in a situation like that, maybe they should have worked on it more studiously to get people informed and on board.
Yeah. This is another one for the justice, from another justice. This is Justice Jane. I have a feeling she did not sit on the Supreme Court of the state of Idaho, but I don't know for sure. But Justice Jones, are they going to release? People want to know. They want to get the information. So will any of the discovery eventually be released? I mean, this whole thing was under a gag order. Judge Hippler got upset that Dateline had all this stuff in their episode. Is there a time down the road where things will be unsealed and the public will get a chance, and the families, more importantly, to look at some of the depraved, I guess, goings on that, were involved in this particular case?
I seriously doubt it. It's kind of like my friend who handled the Bundy prosecution. The really gory details have never come out. And I think, quite frankly, that they should not. And I can't see that a subsequent court on a Freedom of Information request or anything of that nature is going to release that kind of really depraved details.
Yeah. And one other quick question for you, and then we'll start to wrap things up. But Justice Jones, there's reporting today that this isn't the first time, I guess, that DA Bill Thompson has found himself in this sort of situation. Apparently, he cut a similar plea deal all the way back in 1996. There was a killer, a guy named Wenkai Lee, who stabbed two Chinese nationals in Moscow, Idaho. And he removed the death penalty at the time and secured a second-degree murder plea. And the victims' families, in this case, also said that they were betrayed. I'm just wondering if you remember that case. If you know, I don't want to put you on the spot and pin you against him. I know you don't want that, and I don't want that. But do you recall the case back in '96?
I was in private practice at that time, and I don't know that I was following things that closely. It doesn't ring a bell. But, it's one of those things you kind of hate to second guess somebody when you don't know all the facts involved.
Yeah, that is fair. So, again, just to put a little bow on this, there was a prosecutor that was interviewed. I think it was a Fox News Digital story. And this particular prosecutor giving legal analysis, Aaron, I'm going to come to you on this, said that Bryan Kohberger's team likely saw no path around a death sentence after these rulings went against him. The most recent one was the alternate suspect ruling. The judge said no. The judge said no to a continuance. And this prosecutor who was questioned about this said, these are dice I would not want to roll with a client. Do you feel like they just hit a dead end, like a literal dead end, and knew that their client was doomed and said, okay, let's get him off of death row here?
So you're talking about the defense?
Yes.
And so I absolutely agree with that. And I think I said something similar. I've worked, I've been on the other side, but I have a lot of defense attorneys that I respect very much, that I've worked very closely with. that just would come to me with just hands in the air. They knew I had him dead to rights. I was giving them a reasonable deal given the circumstances, and they just couldn't get through to him. With this one, the way that they've been, he's innocent. He's been proclaiming he's innocent. I kind of I don't know why, I just have that feeling. I just kind of wonder if maybe that's something that Ann Taylor's been sort of talking to him all along, and he said, no. And then eventually, after all those rulings went against him, like I think I said it yesterday, he's out of runway, so they hit that point where they really have nowhere else to go with this person, and they're able to finally maybe get through to him and say, do you understand you are going to die? And I mean, I have a lot of defense attorney friends who say that they don't ask their client if they did it. They talk about the evidence, but they never actually ask them because, as Justice Jones said, these aren't people who are necessarily going to be giving you forthcoming answers. And so I always thought that was very interesting from a defense attorney perspective to say, they have this against you, they have this against you, and this is going to go badly if we go to trial. But they don't ask them, and if they actually did it. And I just kind of wonder if maybe this is one of those where when everything went against them, she was finally able to get him to say, please let me ask them for an offer, which is kind of the way it was worded, that they came and said, make us an offer. And in a case this horrific, there's that one, that's really the only chip you can play. It's not like they could have given him any better deal than what they did. It was just, we'll let you live for the next 50 years in prison.
Yeah. Another amazing panel tonight. Really incredible. Colin McCallan, he hosts Is This Legal podcast. He's also a criminal defense attorney out of Denver, and his name sounds like a fine Scotch. He's a fine gentleman. Colin, your final thoughts here. I'm just going to leave it totally wide open. I mean, we're going to have this plea hearing tomorrow. I think the world's going to be watching. We'll be taking it live. Your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts. I'm still trying to unpack them truthfully, because I like you guys and certainly your community of listeners have been paying attention to this case for a while. It is a fascinating case, although terribly tragic. And all of a sudden we've like ground to a halt, and that it kind of like what you said at the beginning of the show, that feels anticlimactic. And I totally understand that not everybody is going to appreciate the outcome. I do think it's the right outcome, though. I do. I think we're getting a very violent person out of the community and in prison where he's never going to be able to hurt anybody again. The case is going to be closed. People are going to be able to move on with their lives for better or for worse. And again, you sometimes have to be careful what you wish for in these things. Wanting to see justice done and then actually seeing it come to fruition are two very, very different things. I'm not going to say that if this case had gone to trial, that that Kohberger would have gotten the death penalty and the Goncalves family would be happy. No one's ever going to know that. And that's the point, I think. I think we have to deal with what we do know. And I do think when you have a person this violent who's going away for the rest of his life, at the end of the day, that's probably good enough. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the final word. Someone here saying that Bryan Kohberger is probably a coward. I would have to agree with that. Erin Tognetti is not. She comes on the show, and she's awesome. She's a former prosecutor and defense attorney out of Pocatello, Idaho. Same thing. Just your final thoughts. I mean, what are you most interested to see tomorrow?
Well, like I said, I'm interested in the allocution, and I think that it could be, I think that it was. I apologize. I think it might have been Justice Jones who said it, but there is a certain meeting of the elements. So when you take a plea deal, right? When we go to trial, we put the elements up in front of the jury, and we have to say, I needed to prove these 5 things to you, and I proved every single one of them. And then you show them how all the evidence meets those elements. That's trial. And then we know that all the elements are met when the jury comes back and finds them guilty. When it's a plea agreement, the judge is taking the plea does have to meet the elements. So it could be a very bare bones allocution, but he's gonna have to know that it at least, you have to say more than the word guilty. And I'm curious if the justice agrees with me, because I know that in plea deals it's very different, because the judge needs to be sure that it does meet the elements of the crime, or else you've left a loophole. So there will need to be a certain amount of that. I do want to just add, though, it was something that the justice said earlier when he was talking about, and it's actually a little bit of what Colin just said about be careful what you wish for, and saying, the justice said, he was talking about people saying horrible things, the defendants in a case saying horrible things. And I still remember, in fact, I will never forget the live coverage of Richard Allen Davis. Do you guys remember Richard Allen Davis in California?
Yeah.
Who killed Polly Klaas?
Yeah. I don't.
And unfortunately, at a sentencing, the accused is always given a chance to speak. And he said the most horrific things that I still remember verbatim, and that case had to have been 30 years ago. And he took his very last moment to be able to speak as a free man to injure the family more. And it was horrific. And so sometimes, I think I mentioned yesterday, if we went all the way through trial, he would maybe have taken the stand and said, I was never there. It's sort of like our listener who said, there is no closure for the family because he's still maintaining his innocence. You have that. You have the bad guy, and he's admitting he's the bad guy. And I think there is a certain peace in that I hope the families can find, because he could proclaim his innocence. He could have gotten sent to prison for the rest of his life, but proclaim his innocence, which, as much as the family's like, we know he did it, right? There's got to be a little concern. What if he's not the guy? He's been proclaiming his innocence for 20 years. They won't have that. They will get, this is our guy. We may never understand why, but I think trying to understand why in a crime like this, in a person who's broken, right? They're just broken in some way that would go and just do something so horrendous that we as normal people can't understand it anyway. And we don't want to, because we're not built that way to be able to understand it. But I think that in the long run, it's not somebody sitting there proclaiming his innocence. It's, this is our guy, and he's broken and we'll never understand it, but at least we know we've got him.
Really well said. Last but certainly not least, is Justice Jones, Jim Jones, who was previously the Attorney General of the great state of Idaho and also served as a Supreme Court justice. So, Aaron said he should have to say more words than just guilty. If you were a betting man, do you think we'll hear more than just that out of Bryan Kohberger?
I suspect that he is not going to add a lot of details. He will make the statements that the judge asks him. Did you commit this crime? The big laundry list of questions that the judge is going to pose to him, I suspect he'll answer. I would suspect that he will not add a lot to it. This is such a high profile crime that people are paying a lot of attention to it. And I think that people need to come away from it with a respect and understanding of our criminal justice system. I think it's unfortunate that some of the victims' families are speaking as if they did not get adequate opportunity to be consulted. I think that's a flaw in the case, and I don't know who's responsible for that, whether they were given the opportunity or not. But from this point forward, I think the admission by Kohberger that he was guilty of these offenses, I think that will help the families a bit. And I think that having the opportunity to make victim impact statements and testify to the court is going to be helpful. I think from this point forward, the case has got to be flawless so that people will come away from it not only the families, but all of the rest of us with the feeling that justice was served, even though the outcome can't be good in any way for the families, that people have confidence that justice was served and things were handled appropriately from this point forward.
And realistically, just a couple more questions for the justice. How often do you get a Supreme Court justice on your show? Not that often. Realistically, how long do you think this would, if he was convicted and the death penalty was imposed, how long do you think it would have realistically been held up on appeals here? Did he freeze at the moment of truth? It was not meant to be then. But look at this. He froze. Not only is he a Supreme Court justice, but look how he freezes. Most people freeze with really weird, crazy faces. He's got that beautiful, calm demeanor. So I'm going to let Justice Jones go. He's maybe, no offense to these two, one of my favorite guests ever. I feel like he's Yoda. Guy's got all the wisdom in the world. Did you guys like him, Colin and Aaron? Guy's got a lot of wisdom. Colin?
Fantastic. Absolutely. Like you just said, I think this is a first for me where I've been in a Zoom call with a former Chief Justice of anything. So very, very cool experience for me, and very wise man.
Yeah. And I think Colin will agree that I'm sure Justice Jones is going to forget more about the law than he and I will ever know.
I agree.
Justice Jones, you're back. We were saying that you're among our favorite guests ever here because you've got all the wisdom in the world. Let's just end on a happy note. I mean, you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. What are your final thoughts on life? Forget criminal justice. What words of wisdom do you give to people about living life the right way?
Well, let me say, my phone crapped out.
That's okay. We forgive you.
The screen went black. I ran out of power. It was warning me that we were having some power problems, but it just died.
That's all good. You're back.
I think the thing that we can take from this is that we're all living together on this planet and in this country and in this state. We have to do everything we can. If we see somebody that apparently is having trouble, you can't turn your head. You can't look away. If you are given the opportunity to speak out with somebody or to give them a shoulder to cry on, my God, we've got to do it. We're all in this together. And when you have somebody like Kohberger, who apparently was sort of a recluse, I don't know. Maybe there's nothing you could have done to avert this tragic outcome, but anytime we have an opportunity to do some good, we should always take it. The only thing I can think that we can take out of this, that if we all get a good lesson in civic engagement, maybe that's all we can hope for.
Thank you so much. I knew we would get the wisdom. Do good. That is the message from Justice Jones. We need more Justice Jones in the world and a lot less of the BKs in the world. But I think we've got way more Justice Jones anyway going on. So thank you to Aaron. Thank you to Colin. And, of course, a huge thanks to the Justice, who I hope will come back and join us. And love you, America. Love you, Denver, Colorado, Pocatello, Idaho, Boise, Idaho. And we're thinking of the families of the victims of this horrific crime. And we'll see you tomorrow. We're going to be taking the hearing live, bringing you a show tomorrow night. It is one busy true crime week. Justice, Colin, and Aaron, if you can stand by for one moment, please stick around.